Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Old Hunt, where we are still celebrating 10 years of Bloodborne. We are playing through the Japanese release, and we are playing through version 1.00. And last time, after an extended set of time discussing item descriptions in the dream and talking about Cainhurst Castle and its history and some of the world building around Bloodborne, we finally decided, we might as well finish off our exploration. And so we made our way up to this set of this very snowy rooftop and encountered Martyr Logarius, the boss. And there's our, lantern right there. And this appears to be the end of the path. There is no way, that's not an invisible wall. There is no way for us to progress any further, or so it seems. Because the item that we found sort of laying around after defeating the boss may influence things a little bit in that regard, and I don't know exactly where I do or don't need to stand for it to work. So I'm just going to back up a little bit here. Back all the way up here, and we'll figure out exactly where the positional triggering is in a second. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about with positional triggering and, the seeming end of this place, first of all, welcome. You must be pretty new to Bloodborne. Either that or you've never looked up information on the internet about it, and also, welcome. It's nice to have you here. Probably, I think, most of the people watching this playthrough know exactly what I'm talking about. And if I can find it, it's probably under a tire, because that's where you'd put it on. This is the item that we received. The Crown of Illusions. And, I guess technically it would be the Crown of Phantom Visions, right? I think Crown of Illusions makes sense, but there's a potential bit of ambiguity that's relevant here, because as we're going to see when we get to the description, there's a little bit of an open question, okay? Is this a crown that creates illusions? Or is this a crown that allows you, it creates these visions of illusions that aren't real, these visions of phantoms that interfere with your understanding of the world? Or is it a crown that allows you to see illusions and therefore penetrate to the truth of what's going on? Okay, we've set up that idea already with a somewhat literal breakdown of the item name here. So let's get to the description, where, once again, we'll see some justification for that ambiguous choice that I put in front of you. Okay, one of the secret treasures, one of the hidden treasures of Cainhurst's possession, I guess might be how I would put it. The old king's crown that was once said to display illusions is also a key to breaking an illusion that hides a secret. And there's a little bit of ambiguity with what's going on with the Japanese here. Again, right, you want to sort of play on this idea of okay, this is a crown that it seems in the past showed illusions to the wearer, right? It's not specified who the wearer is. Well, I guess it's the old crown of the king, right? So probably it would be the king who wore it, and whoever wore it presumably was exposed, was shown these visions, right? And if you look, you can see back to the thing in the title, right? The kanji for miru is being it's somewhat unusual, but it mirrors the thing that we're talking about, right? The phantom visions from the title that I was mentioning. Same exact kanji there, and then Maboroshi, the phantoms or the illusions, that's also the same kanji from the title. So we're getting at this idea that we know that this crown produced illusions for the king, but it also appears to be a key that will break through an illusion that hides a secret. And again, there's a little bit of grammatical ambiguity because it's Japanese. It could be several illusions that hide several secrets. We're going to put this on and we're going to find out. Actually, it's probably just one specific illusion that it's got the key to revealing. But there's a little bit of a question mark here, right? On the one hand, it is straightforward enough in giving you this information that I think it's not really worth questioning too much whether or not it works. However, there is also just enough information here to have just a little seed of doubt about, well, how real is it, the things that I'm seeing when I wear this crown? Because it both produces illusions and is the key to breaking one. How do I know which one's being broken and which one's being kept, right? And again, the ambiguity of the grammar of the Japanese means that it could theoretically apply in either case. And there are several things that it could be hiding from you. At the same time, there are several things that it could be revealing to you. And therefore, you would lose touch with what's real. And it'd be kind of cool if in the game, if you had this on, right, in addition to doing something very specific in Cainhurst, it also had other effects throughout the game that would really make you question whether or not it was real. But the way it's been implemented, I think you can actually maintain a pretty solid grasp as to what's going on and what is or isn't real. So despite the description, like, having that element of doubt in it, I don't think players come away from the game experiencing a great deal of doubt in relation to it. But still, I think it's an interesting way to set up this item. And then that's all, by the way, the entire first section up to the line break, or the double line break. And then after it, right, we have that blank line, and now I'm going to continue with the description. Okay, so therefore, Logarius took it upon himself to wear this, so that none would ever come into contact with the vile secret. And I use the word vile because I'm just sort of reflexively going back to the official translation. If we want to be a little bit more literal, the ritually impure secret. Because once again, we've seen associations between the Vilebloods and ritual impurity, and this is a ritually impure secret that would be involved. And I actually really like the idea that it's like a vile secret for the Vilebloods. I think that hangs together very nicely, because it sets up the nature of the thing that's being hidden. Also, I don't think I commented on this, but it is interesting that, you know, we've heard about how there's several, like, secret treasures of Cainhurst, and one of them are the Executioner's Gloves that we currently have equipped, and another is this Crown of Illusions, and there's this vile secret that maybe has something to do with, like, the storeroom that these secret treasures are hidden in. Maybe not, because we actually find the secret treasures hidden about various other places. But it is interesting to once again see this reference back to the hidden treasures of Cainhurst. It's kind of a cool idea. Anyway, let's finish this description by going to the final line. Okay, so this is sort of like in a wondering tone. So, like, you know, what was it that he, presumably Logarius, saw atop the frozen throne? Because we know, right, this produces illusions. This is a good way of saying, like, so even if you, the player, when you put this on, don't necessarily see a bunch of illusions, you know that in the lore, it has the effect of producing illusions, as well as revealing, in the way that I understand the game, one specific secret. And therefore, you have this idea that he would sit on this throne, he wore the thing so that no one would ever gain this key to the secret of the Vilebloods, right? But in doing so, he took upon himself having to endure all the various illusions that the crown showed him. Kind of a cool concept, no pun intended. Right, so, having read through that description, let's take off our knight's hat, and let's find, here we go, the Crown of Illusions. And now that we're wearing this, we can come back to this apparent dead end, and an illusion will be revealed. There it is. Now, all of a sudden, there's a way to go forward. There's a whole additional aspect of Cainhurst Castle that we have unveiled. And since we no longer need this crown to make it real, we can just go back to our knight set here. I think it looks nice. And normally I would check all the little crevices off around these particular statues of knights on horseback, but I already know for a fact that there are no items in this particular part of the hall.
Visitor, I claim no subjects, but here lieth our throne. Kneel afore us, or get thee gone.
And here we have the vile secret, right? The ritually impure secret. It is this person right here. Oops. Herself. Dang it. I didn't want to... No! Stop jumping through the chair to show my face. Here we go. Okay. This right here. The Vileblood Queen. The Cainhurst's Queen of Blood. It's a little bit premature for me to say that, but I don't think it's such a big secret that I would give that information away. Also, don't mind me while I raid your secret treasure storehouse here. You get that unopened summons. Might as well activate this lantern while we're here. And I don't think there are any other items around. Of course, we have all this statuary scattered about. See, I remembered that there were no other treasures in the first part of the room. I didn't remember if there were any additional treasures besides that one unopened summons in this other, like, throne room portion. But, oh well. Now I know. So, being that there don't seem to be any other treasures, also, once again, we're seeing here the crest of Cainhurst. Let's talk to this person and get some confirmation about some of the claims that I've been making.
Visitor. Moon-scented hunter. I am Annalise, Queen of Castle Cainhurst. Ruler of the Vilebloods, and sworn enemy of the Church. Yet our people are murdered, and we are prisoner to this wretched mask. What is it thou art in search of?
So she's met with a sorry fate. She's the head of a people who no longer exist, and they've all been slaughtered, and she herself was apparently locked away in here. And Logarius, this is why he took it upon himself. You know, his whole mission was to expunge the Vilebloods. Apparently, she was able to escape his plan in the sense that she's still alive. Everyone else of the bloodline was extinguished, and she's right? She's imprisoned by the Iron Mask, apparently, and she's in this particular room, so she can't leave it, and no one could get in while Martyr Logarius had the crown upon his head. So, interesting situation. Locked in something of a stalemate. But of course now, we've overcome Martyr Logarius, we have penetrated the secret of the Vilebloods, and here we are in Cainhurst Castle talking to Annalise herself, the Queen of Blood. And, okay, we have two options here. We could just leave, or we could ask for a Blood Clan contract, right? So request maybe Vileblood Oath, I think, might be the official translation. This definitely, like, character limitations had to play a role in deciding the translation, just because, I mean, look at you can visually see that the first option here is almost sort of at the limit of what the Japanese can display, and the Japanese can display more in a limited character space than English can. So they were probably pushing it on whatever they put for this translation, which I can't remember off the top of my head, right? It is interesting that, right, this literally invokes the language of a contract, but I think the idea of an oath sort of works better. If I remember correctly, I could be remembering this wrong. The official translation uses this as an oath, and I think it makes sense as an oath because you are, right, you're making an agreement. There is no, like, physical paper thing that you're signing, sort of unlike at the beginning of the game when the Blood Minister looks at you and says, first you'll need a contract, and then it takes you to the character creation screen. That character creation screen is, like, purportedly anyway, subbing in for this idea of a formal written up thing, right? You actually write your name, and then you go through the rest of the procedure, and then he concludes that by saying, good, all signed and sealed, right? You're actually creating a contract there. We're going to see what is entailed by accepting this agreement eventually, and when we undergo that particular interaction, it's not like I'm picking up a pen and citing anything, right? So visually, it doesn't actually make sense to think of it as a contract. You're sort of entering into a special agreement, more like a compact or an oath, or again, all things more along those sorts of lines. But literally, this isn't right. I think Vileblood might have been involved. I had this flash of, right, swear, Vileblood, oath. I don't remember if that's accurate. But literally, if we're looking at the Japanese here, right, this is request a contract of the clan, right, the blood clan. Because, Ketsuzoku, I've talked about it before, literally just means like a clan, but obviously this is Cainhurst and this is Bloodborne, so it's very tied in with the idea of blood. I don't want to rehash that whole thing that I was talking about before. But sort of you're saying, like, it's interesting because this is a clan, but you as a total outsider can request to take an oath to become part of it. It's not normally how clans work. We're going to see there's a little bit of an exception with Cainhurst, so let's continue on with our options here.
Well, well. An odd hunter thou art indeed. We've tired of these piteous nights. Share in our plight, and take oath against the church. If thou wouldst this path walk, I prithee, partake of my rotted blood.
Also, I just want to say, I've mentioned this in Translation Born as well, but I love the sort of early modern English take that they've given Annalise here. It makes total sense. I don't think we've gotten this information quite yet, but we're going to find out she's undying, right? You can't kill her. This is the reason why they had to imprison her and set this trap, right? The Vilebloods tried to kill her and they failed. Not the Vilebloods. The Executioners tried to kill her and they failed. The Vilebloods definitely would not have tried to kill her. But despite their best efforts, they couldn't kill her, so they've imprisoned her in this situation. And so we're getting at this idea of her as this sort of being that's been around for a long time. So it makes sense that her language would be sort of from another era. And at the same time, she's also a figure of royalty. So this sort of formal style of address, I think every now and then you get a usage of the royal we in here, right? I prithee partake of my rotted blood is not the royal we, but we claim no subjects, but here lieth our throne, right? That's the royal we. So it's pretty cool, I think, to be able to invoke all these older ideas of English, and it just perfectly suits the character. Love that they did that. Anyway, we have two options again here. One is perform the, again, literally, I think, contract of blood, and then do not perform. And we're going to perform the contract of blood. We're going to take the blood oath. Might be how I would be inclined to translate that. And we're going to see what exactly is involved.
Very well. Drink deep of our blood. Feel the spreading corruption burn. Now, thou art too a Vileblood. We two, the very last on this earth.
Fun thing for 1.00, there's still a line in here. She's talking about 3 remaining clan members of the Cainhurst's blood clan. It's supposed to be 2. The English voice line is correct, right? This is another point where we'll see in updates the Japanese subtitle gets changed and it becomes we two, right? It matches the official English voiced line. So again, we're seeing a point where the translators were working with the developers, and when they came to the voiced recorded lines, they clearly were more clued in on where the script was going to land than the Japanese subtitles were at the time of 1.00's release. So, interesting remnant of an older version of the game there. Also, an important thing to remember, there's a line in here where Annalise says, in English, feel the spreading corruption burn, something to that effect. The Japanese is, partake of this blood. It is ritually impure, if we're being literal, and therefore, I think you will find it hot. I could be, therefore hot, it might be as simple as that. But the idea is because it's ritually impure, you can feel it like burning as it goes through your body. That's why the official translation is feel the spreading corruption burn, right? Because you have this impure blood that you're taking into yourself, and it's sort of this form of corruption. And in doing that, in taking that in, right? This is why we're saying like swear the blood oath, right? It's you're taking, and this is how an outsider can become part of the Cainhurst clan, is because Annalise is actually providing you with some of her blood, and in doing so, that's sort of converting you into one of the Vilebloods. And as part of that process, we get the Vileblood Oath Rune. This is the first Oath Rune that we've acquired, and it is ritual impurity. Sure enough, right? It's all this stuff in Japanese that's associated with the Vilebloods. It's ritual impurity all the way down. Kegare, 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 kegare. And it all lines up very nicely in the Japanese in a way that I don't know if they could have done in English, because like I was talking about, right, we're talking about blood dregs as an item, linking up with the idea of corruption, I think sort of makes sense, and linking up with the idea of the vile bloods, right, the ritually impure bloodline. That's just, first of all, that's way too much of a mouthful. It's not going to fit in where all the places you need it to fit. It's not really the ritual impure aspect of the blood that you're going to find. Like it's not workable. In addition to sounding terrible, in my opinion, right? That you can feel differently about that, but I think it sounds awful. So I really like each one of the solutions that the official translators arrived at, but I do think it's interesting, right? Because it's interesting to contrast the difference in experience you can have in the Japanese as opposed to the English version of the game. The Japanese version of the game is a lot more consistent, and I think it's interesting in the sense that there are certain aspects of the lore that I've seen people like dig into, where if the English uses a bunch of different words to refer to the same concept, a lot of English-speaking players will be like, oh, okay, this is all a bunch of different words for the same thing, because English uses a lot more variety of terms. I've seen some analysis by Japanese players who will want to differentiate different forms of beasthood because it's referred to in different terms in the Japanese. And that personally is not how I would interpret it. I would interpret it in the Japanese just like I would in the English. Use a different term. It's the same core concept, though. It's all related to beasthood, as opposed to there being like various different types of beasthood depending on what. Now, obviously, there is a certain extent to which there is a different manifestation of the beasts that things turn into, right? You have the cleric type beasts, which are bigger, right, because of the increased resistance they have to the transformation. You have the people that turn into werewolves, as opposed to the people that turn into sort of like the ogres or the trolls or whatever you want to call them, right? And there's a lot of additional variety like all through there, right? And then even some of the beasts, right? There's the one that we didn't get to see it because I killed it so quickly in this playthrough, but it will hurl fire at you, even though beasts normally don't get along with fire. So there is a differentiation you can make in the bestial transformations, but I'm inclined to read it all as a sort of underlying bestial transformation, as opposed to, depending on which word you see, you get a different result, or there's a different form of beasthood for that. I could be wrong, but I do think it's interesting that it sort of falls, in my opinion anyway, along these linguistic lines, where the Japanese is much more likely to use the same term all the time, and the English is much more likely to use some stylistic variation, just because that's better in English. It's just better English writing to not use the same word every single time, because it loses the impact. Anyway, that's the Vileblood Oath here, the official translation being corruption, which I think makes some sense. And then the Cainhurst badge, it looks like. The Cain proof, literally. But it's going to be, I think if we end up taking a look at that, maybe not in this episode because we're pretty lore heavy already, but that is going to be a badge that is going to give us access to Cainhurst stuff. So, now that we've got all that and we've gotten our gesture, let's continue on here. And, okay, this is where we get back to, right, the item name sort of thing. We can offer blood dregs, or we can leave. And we don't have any blood dregs to offer, right? So we're just going to end up having to leave. But blood dregs, again, right, literally impurity of blood, right? Ritual impurity of blood. That's not a good name for an item. It's just not. So you have to, in English, create some sort of variety there. You can't just have this one term that's kegare all the way through. And I like the official translation's solution here. But, you know, like I said, some people feel a little bit differently about certain aspects of how the official translators dealt with this sort of repeated information presented in the Japanese. It doesn't bother me, but again, this is one of my weaker areas when it comes to looking at Bloodborne's lore from the perspective of someone who specializes in the Japanese aspect of the game. So maybe I've once again sort of overlooked and fallen into the same trap in terms of blind spots. Anyway.
We await thy return. This chamber was made not for one alone. For the honor of Cainhurst.
Got an interesting bit of final dialogue there. And then, of course, the prompt here is kneel. And if we don't, this chamber wasn't made for one alone. What if I want to sit next to you?
Arrant fool. Vileblood or no, forget not. We are thy queen. Bend the knee.
It's just such a good line. It's so good. Right off the bat with errant fool. I just, it's such a strong delivery, right? What a force of personality. She's just locked in here. She's in the mask. We're the only one besides her who's in her clan now. And she's just like, no. Like, I don't care what the situation is. I'm still queen here. You want to talk to me? You go kneel over here on the ground. I love it. Anyway. I think that's enough exploration of Cainhurst Castle. This, by the way, is the reason I didn't go back to the dream at the end of the last episode, was because I knew we had a little bit more exploration of Cainhurst to do, and as you've seen, there's no actual enemies in here, but we have activated like a number of different quest lines and things. But having done all that, having gotten all this set up, I think it's time that we do return to the Hunter's Dream. So I will see you there. All right, back in the Hunter's Dream, and I think I've got enough for a level. It's going to be close. I remember last time levels were more expensive than I thought they should be. Yep. All right, that's fine.
Farewell, good mate.
I can spend some of the cold blood items, and that should get me across the line here. Which, by the way, if anyone's curious, in the course of that montage, I did use 2 of these kin cold bloods here to boost my blood echoes so that I could buy some blood vials without having to do a bunch of farming. So I am down some of those, but I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think if I use 5 of these... Oh yeah, we're like way over 30,000. Okay.
Welcome home. What is it? Very well. Let me...
Alright, let's just boost strength here. And now there's one more weapon that I can get access to, that I can play around with in this playthrough. All right. And at this point, I think it's just going to be me setting my sights on some other things that I can do here. So I just want to make sure very quickly. Right, okay. So now we have access to the Chikage. I'm not going to be able to use this weapon in the playthrough. It's just going to be too much of an investment in Blood Tinge. And honestly, even if I could, I'd be terrible with it. So it probably wouldn't be a great idea. I was hoping I would be able to show off a little bit more of that weapon, but there's only so much I can do in a playthrough. I'm going to have to save up for this set. Okay, there's one more set up in the inside bath, but I'm still going to hold off on that one. Boy, the game, there's really a lot of items in this game. You don't pay attention to it when you're just running through, but when you're trying to take some amount of a look at all of them and using them to puzzle together a bunch of the lore, it sneaks up on you. There's more than you think. Okay, and I think what I'm going to do is I've decided, keep pushing my spear here, my saw spear, as high as I can go, which is going to be to +8. And I'm going to use this to do some chalice dungeoneering and should be able to make some good progress. And, I've basically said I want to have that saw spear as one of my sort of game final options for a while. I feel like it's pretty safe. Also, that is a weapon that I haven't used much of before. Like, I was using it a little earlier in this playthrough, but it's the most I've used it yet, and it's the most I'm going to be using it. I realize this episode is a little bit short, but if I was to do more, it would be a lot more lore at this point. Oh, I know there's one more thing I can do that's going to be very quick. So there's one more place I'm going to warp to, and then I'm going to call it, and I'll probably do some chalice dungeoneering in between episodes, like I was saying, and we'll pick up with a little bit more lore in the next actual proper episode. So there's one more place I'm going to warp to, and then we'll move on from there. Okay. Just want regular old Central Yarnum. Right. Here we are. And if this is not a 1.00 thing, the potential issue, then we should get a new dialogue from Gilbert at this point.
Why me? Why? Dear gods, what have I done? Save me. Please, save me.
I'm sorry, Gilbert. It's painful. It's a painful one. But he is here. There is this one additional line. It took me until my Translation-Born playthrough to find out that this line existed. And for whatever reason, that particular episode of Translation-Born got a decent number of views. And I remember there was a comment on it where someone was saying, is that a cut content that you've gotten access to? No, it's been in the game. This is in 1.09, it's in 1.00. It's just, it requires you to go back and talk to Gilbert one more time than you would naturally do, right? If you check in at every natural checkpoint for the rest of the game, you would skip right over this dialogue, go defeat the boss of Bergenworth, and you come back and this particular house will be in a different state. And it's too late to get this sort of plaintive dialogue from Gilbert, where you get to basically hear him as he's dying, which is horrifying, but it's the predicament he's been in since the start of the game, right? He's known he hasn't been long for this world, right? The blood bought him time, and now it's the night of the hunt, and he's helped us all he can, and he's purely focused on his suffering. And kind of a downer, but that's the way it goes. And this storyline is not quite over, as I was sort of indicating before, but it's not going in a happy direction. So, yep, there's it's a little bit of a sad note to go out on, but Gilbert's fate again, we're not quite done with it. So, and we were talking to someone else. We've got the Vileblood oath going on now. So we at least are going to be experiencing something of a different state. And it was very nice of him to talk to us. From a translation perspective, right, I think the key thing here with Gilbert is the idea that he's experiencing this pain. He's basically come to the end of his life. And he's basically sort of succumbed to his illness. And you get this plaintive, like, why me, why, I think makes sense as a translation. The Japanese is a little bit like, why am I the only one, right? Why just me? But it's the sort of complaint that you would make on your deathbed. And I think the underlying idea gets across just fine, whether you're listening to the English voice acting or reading the subtitles, right? That's a particular nuance that might be nice to get, but I think it doesn't necessarily add a whole lot. And there's nothing, right, this is why I knew this would potentially be a reasonable dialogue to go out on, because it is fairly self-contained, right? It's not like a hugely important thing for the lore. Anyway, like I was saying, this episode's basically gone on long enough. I've got some chalice engineering to do, so I'm going to return to the dream, and we'll say goodbye, and I'll get on with that. All right, if you've made it this far in the episode, thanks for getting through it. This was a pretty, non-action-y one. This was a lot of conversations and a little bit of lore and some item reading and just not a lot of action. But I hope you enjoyed it anyway. I'm going to call an end to my hunt for the evening, and as always, I wish all of you good hunting.